So, first off, action research project we had to do for class. Ask, Read, Tell was a strategy we talked about in WIN groups. It was for comprehension. And so this was what we talked about. This was kind of like the introduction to what's going on. Common Core standards ask us to use a whole bunch of skills, but if kids can't use skills, if they don't comprehend stuff that they're reading. So my idea was that we can implement this strategy to comprehend, to help them better comprehend what they're reading for expository text only. So we used informational nonfiction, not literature, for this experiment or kind of study. The purpose of the study, again, to increase comprehension and to overall increase comprehension for expository text as well. A literature review, just some baseline data. The NATE talked about in 2013, 30% of fourth graders were unable to perform the key skills of comprehension expository text. Pretty high number, actually. And also down here, our reading scores have not improved from 2007 to 2013, and also only went up 1 point between 2007 and 2011. So they're kind of stagnant. We're staying where it is. There's nothing going up. And in the past, it's always been increasing, and now we're kind of hitting a level point where nothing's really happening with our reading scores. This is a brief definition of reading comprehension, and just like combining all your background knowledge and everything you know, working through it to understand what the text is saying. Literature review. I found a study out there that compared content-based instruction, strategies with comprehension, and then a basal reader. So they had 3 different classes, or 3 different 5th grade sets where they had one taught content-based instruction, which was they had their own written out questions focused throughout on one specific skill. And so as they read the text, the questions were asked to the students, and they got to talk back and forth to each other, meet in small groups, pose questions as well. And then they had the strategy-based instruction where they were taught specific comprehension skills like summarizing, making inferences, generating questions, sitting down and actually looking at how to comprehend a text, and not a specific skill based on with it. They used 6 5th grade classrooms. They separated classrooms into those 3 categories that we talked about: the basal, content-based, and strategy-based. 2 classrooms using questioning specifically related to the text being read. This is what the content-based was. They had 2 classrooms doing this, 2 classrooms with the strategy, and then they had 2 classrooms that were the control, which was they just used a basal like we do with our journeys. And after the findings found there were no statistical significance for any of them. What they did find this is kind of disheartening for us, that the basal scored the lowest on what it was for strategy and content-based. And strategy and content-based were kind of together with it. So as this kind of led me to believe, wanted to see my own findings of what strategy could do with my own kids. This was an entire classroom, so I was thinking of a small group setting. Maybe that'd be a lot better. And also for struggling readers, because there's not a lot of studies out there that focus on small group that are developing readers. And as we grouped our WIN groups, I had the developing readers, kind of the first grade, or first and 1 and 2 years below 4th grade level. There were 2 questions that we asked as I was going through this. One was the Ask, Read, Tell strategy for the classroom, and that was to improve interventions and improve comprehension. And then the other one was the PLC, talk about common assessment planning to develop our common assessments, and then also to demonstrate with our mid-year survey to see if that went up or down. You took the survey twice. The first one, justification for these is not a lot of research on the strategy. The Ask, Read, Tell couldn't find any about it. The students need another option out there. There's nothing. They're sitting there, they're reading and not being able to comprehend, so teach them skills is not working, so we're going to work at a strategy here. And then also, students have not been taught the use of these comprehension strategies, and I have not used these before, so I found out this is an idea great to get myself another avenue to teach students as well. My first research question we just talked about was the Ask, Read, Tell strategy, was the art. My sampling of participants, we had four boys, 1 girl, all ranging from 9 to 10 years old. They were 1 to 2 years below grade level based on the MAP testing we did. And also 2 of them had speech IEPs. So where there were no IEPs in here for reading or any other IEPs, it was just based on what we scored with the MAP. And this is the chart we use to help ourselves out. 169 to 179 is where they scored. So you kind of see it falls right in this range between second and third at the beginning of the years. And these are the materials that I use, my instruments. This was the ask, read, tell strategy. The very first part, the students sit there and they ask questions about the text. They say, what do I already know, and then what do I want to know? And I had a tough time at the very beginning for kids asking good questions. They wanted the questions ranged from everything that you wanted to say. It wasn't even focused on the topic sometimes. We kind of got it honed down as we're doing it. And then the kids didn't really understand that they had connections originally. So when you talk about it, and we talked about like jurors, because that's what we did the other day. We talked about juries and jurors. They were like, oh yeah, I've seen a juror on TV, or I know what a jury is. Yeah, that's talking about people going to jail and stuff. And so it kind of gave me a little, let them see that they already knew a little bit about it, even though they didn't really know what the words meant in the text. After that, then they would read carefully, and I gave them Post-it notes. And so after each paragraph, they would put a plus or a minus, and they circled the plus if they got it, and they circled the minus if they didn't. If they didn't get it, then they went back in the text and read it again and kind of looked for clue words that didn't really know what's going on. And then after if they didn't get it the third time or the second time, I would meet with them and talk to them about the text and kind of guide them through it. Then the last one is the tell. This was they would get with a partner and talk about what their questions were, what answers they had, and then also what interesting facts they've learned. And so we kind of did that throughout the time, and it was all whole group for like 2 or 3 weeks where nobody got to work independently. And then it kind of worked as they kind of go off on their own as they're working through it, and they could work and talk to each other. On your desk there was the organizer. This is what it was. I got it from Intervention Central, and that's how they answered the questions for Ask, Read, Tell. And then also I followed a video that kind of showed me how to use Ask, Read, Tell. Some like experts that created it, they showed me how it should be used, which was very instructional for me and helped me understand what was going on. My data collection, I used that graphic organizer. I also used the Post-it notes, like I said. I had comprehension quizzes, and that's an example quiz that they took. I went to Newsella and had the articles printed out, and then I took some of the questions and then adjusted some to meet what I needed to do. And at the very end, I added a little summarizing, supporting detail question to kind of see if they're able to comprehend what's going on. The kids did a very good job with them. You'll see as the data's coming up that if they were here and paid attention, they did very well on the quizzes. If they didn't, then it kind of faltered. And at the very end, I used the post test to gauge the impact of the lesson. I wanted to use the map testing, but since we're not doing map till Monday for reading, I couldn't use that data. I'm kind of curious to see what's going to tell me back. This was the data from the 5 weeks I did it. We had student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, and you can see student 4 was absent 2 days. Kind of went into their scores as going at the very end. And this was my quantitative, the numbers data that went with the quizzes average and their post-test average as it went through. And as you can see, students 1 and 2 increased, student 3 decreased, student 4 increased, but they were the lowest one scored, and then student 5 stayed the same. The reason for this, I do believe, as I'm looking at the data as my analysis, is that these two students, students 1 and 2, were the ones that scored the highest on the map tests. And so it kind of gave me an understanding I would think that because they scored the highest on the map, they would then score high again as well. Also, they were the ones that asked the best questions. They were the ones that questioned the most, that participated the most during our win. They did a very good job with that as we're going through it. And then student 4 had the lowest because of those 2 missed quizzes, and they're absent quite a bit in class. And then student 5 was also absent, and it was a non-participant as well. Kind of sat there like a bump on a log, didn't really do much, had to provoke this person or this student many times to kind of get reading and get focused on what's going on. So you can kind of see that it wasn't really the strategy that I thought was going wrong. It was the fact that the students weren't really participating or kind of into what's going on in the lesson. It kind of fed the data back to me. I also used the qualitative data, so I asked them a survey, and I gave them a little survey to if they enjoyed the using of this strategy as well. It was very similar to the survey that we did. It was very true, somewhat true, and not true. And these are the 4 questions I asked. The first one was about do they enjoy it? The second one was do they think it helps them? The third one was do they use it outside of win time, like in your guys' classrooms? And the last one was will I continue to use this strategy in class? The results were my averages. So we were close to one on this one that they enjoyed using, and that kind of made me kind of happy because they come to win time and they're happy to do that stuff. They're not doing pen and paper questions the entire time. They're actually talking about what they're reading, and it's working out well. They kind of did think that it helped them understand. I think some of them were not too sure if it was there or not because it's closer to the 2 of true and not being totally true. This was one that I knew was going to be like this. They don't use it outside of class. They just think it's win time and that's it. So when they come to win time, they think that's just specifically used for there and that's it. So I'm going to have to use a better time of harping that. And the last one, this was the closest one to one that they will continue to use it. And I have a reason of why I thought that was the best. Overall, they had a positive impact. They enjoyed it. They're enthusiastic. They couldn't win time, like I said. I need to emphasize the strategy being used outside of class, and I have been trying to do that the last couple of weeks, is telling them, are you using it when you go to read? Are you doing this at home? Are you doing what you need to be doing? And so hopefully they can understand that better. And then the last one, I think 4 scored the highest because I was standing there as they were doing it. And so they're pleasing, and so they're going to circle the answer that I do believe needs to be the best answer. So that's why that was the best answer, I do believe, for that one. My next steps, like I just said, I'll continue to use this ask, read, tell strategy in win groups. I will increase the level of the text. I've used a 2nd grade basal, and now I'm going to use a 3rd grade one now. And I can see it's already having a little bit of trouble because it's a little more complex vocabulary as going through it. I'm going to work with more fictional text as well. I'm going to wrap that in there to show them that they can use it not just for nonfiction. And then I'm going to push for the strategy to be used outside of win groups, telling them that, hey, use it in class, use it in class, use it in class. So hopefully that can show them that it's not just a win time thing. Then my PLC question was the common assessment planning tool on collective creativity. So hopefully that can increase on what we get together and help ourselves out as we do these common formative assessments. And like I said, this was my sampling again as we're going through the question. Experience range from 1 to 15 years, 15 plus, 3 female, 1 male, 1 teacher in her first year teaching. Sorry, Derek, I had to say that. And then all teachers are self-contained. So this is the kind of a rundown of what we did. We did the mid-year PLC survey. My main focus was analyzing student data. And I drew on this one right here, analyzing assessment data, the percentage you did. We had an average of 10% before we started talking about analyzing data and getting that done. So that wasn't really a huge part of our PLCs. It was more just, and then the developing common assessment was like 80 or 85. And so that was just all of our time spent doing those assessments and not really looking at the data or analyzing them and grading them together and making rubrics and stuff like that. I focused on 4 questions in the survey, and this was all about looking at the common assessments and seeing what we believed we were doing. One was creating rubrics, using rubrics, analyzing data, and then also making next steps of what's going on with the data. Again, this was the planning tool that we used, planning assessments, administer assessments, and then analyzing the scores together, creating rubrics and stuff like that. And this is what I kind of really focused on with this one and those last 2 steps of the process that we were doing. And the pre-test as we did it, the pre-learning design implementation, or the pre-talking about it, their average scores were in between 2 and 3 of being true and somewhat true. And as you can see, the one about assessing student work samples and the one about rubrics were the highest ones. We were more on the lines of somewhat true. And I think this was a big deal because we had created that one rubric to go with our student success goals. And so we did that, and I think we used that one, and we don't really do that a lot. I think this should be, I personally probably thought it should be closer to a 4, to tell you the truth. And so this was after we talked about it. I looked at some surveys as we're doing. Kind of went down, and then some of them kind of stayed the same as we're going through it. And then this, our average percentage time increased to only 5% though. So make sure we're kind of looking at this, and this is what my analysis looked like. This was our pre and post. So it went down, one stayed the same as with our answers to true, somewhat true, and not true. And then my analysis continued. We feel that we do analyze data on a more frequent basis, so we have talked about it. We do that as individuals. We don't really do it as groups. Team feels that we assess work samples all the time. I feel like we do that. We assess a ton. We do a good job of creating those samples as well. The using and designing rubrics did not change because we haven't really gotten together and talked about, well, how is this assessment going to be graded? how should it look, what are those assessments for us. And I wrote this that there's not a lot of strictly writing assessments in there, because we wrote the rubric for the writing as they wrote their summaries and stuff like that. But we still need to have a rubric that goes along with our grading as we're going through it, to see that everybody's on the same page and no one's saying, well, my kid scored a 6 out of 7, my kid scored a 4 out of 7, when you're grading harder than what somebody else should be. And all of a sudden that student get it. T, making a point to discuss student results. I said that because we've been trying to kind of talk about it and get going. We did have to meet with Miss Ferry the other day, so we couldn't get into it and talk about it. And then we need to be we're being more purposeful with our data results. We are talking about that and grouping them in. Our win groups are changing. We are doing that, but it still needs to be something on a more frequent basis. Next steps, we're going to continue to use it. Focus on analyzing student data. Focus on creating those rubrics. This is the big one I think we need to be doing. And also score student assessments as a PLC. So these last two are the ones I do believe. This doesn't need to be done every time, but I think if we get an idea of how the other person thinks or how we're looking at it, we can get a better idea of how we should be grading them. And I know that Sharon's talked about, I've never really done this a lot, and I know you've talked about it before, that it's eye-opening when you grade stuff together and kind of see what's going on. So that may be something we could do on a more frequent basis. And then my reflection of the whole thing, I do believe that the reteaching the strategies is beneficial only if the students participate as they're going through it. The strategy-based instruction can positively affect students, like some of the data showed in it. PLC, like I just said, again, focus on creating and using rubrics, and it's also important to analyze data as a team. So that's kind of my reflections of the entire thing, kind of wrapped up in one slide. I thought it was a beneficial experience to go through this action research and do all the things that teachers don't really regularly do, that I thought teachers didn't regularly do, but actually I figured out they do it quite a bit. Just the analyzing data and looking at this stuff was very beneficial to me. And these are my references and resources as we're going through it for that one. So that's it. Any questions? Anything at all? Yay! All right.